Blog Talk Radio.
And in those days, there were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on Earth we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars, and imagine there's got to be planets like ours. Some conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we lost. That indeed they believe that these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve and eventually reach what they seek and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they fall in the works of our hands, all but just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past. Time elapses and with it are much of the facts. Some imagine that God came in alien craft. They react in this way, they're so desperate for meaning and purpose, but satanic service. They know that they have evil motives. Am I making you nervous? I'm just scratching the surface. The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. In the blink of an eye, all believers will be raptured. Anyone left receives a mark or the caption. This leader will arise, claim his origins are alien, possessed by Satan on the side of the Nephilim. Profess those who left held us back from evolving, and now that they're gone, we'll solve all of Earth's problems. The worship of any one God will be halted, evolving to gods and ourselves be exalted. They'll play on these lines, and in time they'll devise and arrive at a plan that will help hypnotize all the ones left behind, the spiritually blind. He's stolen their souls, now he's stealing their minds. It's already started, we're seeing the signs. Just study the word, prophecies all aligned. Now chop off the heads of all those who fight at one earth, one world. Aren't you excited? The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. Where will you be in the year 2012? Are they casting a spell they're not ready to tell? It's time to reveal what they tried to keep veiled. Pure evil they hail and they sell it so well. He fell from the heavenly realms where he dwelled, a once beautiful angel that tried to rebel. Expelled from the light into darkness and hell, now a serpent and snake with reptilian scale. He wears a disguise with angelic wings and mimics the truth with a lie so obscene. He always repeats the same thing he told Eve, that you'll be supreme, a king or a queen, that you can evolve to an enlightened being, a god of your own that can do anything. He feeds on our souls with this fraudulent scheme in so many ways, but it's all just the same. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near.
Why hide yourself with, creating UFO crafts and things like that? Why that deception if that's indeed what's going on?
The creatures figured out that there was one way that they could frighten mankind, and that is to present themselves as technologically superior beings from physical UFOs.
Why would they want to abduct human beings?
UFO abduction might not be caused by physical occupants, but from creatures living in perhaps what we would call another dimension.
Posing as occupancy.
Yes, the same type of interfering, harassing, paraphysical creature in every culture worldwide.
Bridges crossing forever, strange things I've come to know. I'm cruising around this weird dream, the sun casting shadows on lonely souls. Unsure sometimes why realities intertwine. Your life somehow keeps crossing the dream of mine. Moments of coincidence one can only try to deny. The grander scheme of creation is starting to come to life. Elohim, ancestors, seduction in Eden, stories of lost paradise and banishment from the kingdom. Something doesn't connect at all, the rise and fall of man, and how it all began. Somehow it seems we've got lost in separation, and now we're reaching back in desperation to what eludes us even now. Beneath it all, one story: God, the angels, and heavenly glory. Myths of how it all began. The birth of man, Eve and Adam, the consequence of events that all seem random. A reminder this moment with you, there's another journey we voyage through, passing the trials of life again. Having grasped the long-hidden secret of dreams, I've tapped the mind of He that created the everything. And now things can never be the same. Maybe now you too will remember, as do I. The memory fills me with forgotten longing, banished tears raining down my weary, worldly face. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is FallenAngels.tv. It's a Sabbath broadcast, 5 p.m. Eastern, East Coast, United States of America. I thank those of you that have taken the time to join me this evening as we go through and try to share some of the secrets that many are now being brought to discernment upon. And my hope is that in the fellowship that we share together, that we can enable each other to come to remembrance in such way that we can fulfill our sacred duty, our roles and missions for being here in the flesh and at this strange and special time. And it is my opinion and belief that we are that final generation that will see the unfolding, the climax, the apex of all history, in that everything that has been prior to now, that everything will be revealed, that the secrets will be known, and that the Spirit will be poured out on all flesh, so that denying the Creator, denying His Son, denying salvation, that all that will be a personal choice, and that we will be responsible if that is your course of action, and that is the direction that you take, that we can no longer claim ignorance or claim to not have had chance to know, to not have had access to the revelations which would wipe away the cobwebs and grant one a clear picture of understanding, so that individually we can all understand why all things have been until this point now, and what is coming and what now is. And so, to deny the Creator and to deny the Maker, to deny the secrets and the gospel and the revelation and discernment that comes with understanding those things, that will be our turning our backs on all those things. And that it says within the Word that it would be better for someone to have never been born than to come to know the truth and turn your backs upon it. And so, today we're going to be learning from each other, and we're going to be discussing the second part of what I think is one of the most important stories to understand. And that has to do with the creation of modern humanity and of our ancestors, our ancestral parents, Adam and Eve, and in understanding what they went through and how the fall, the collective fall of humanity and the beguilement of Adam and Eve ties into the wars of heaven and earth and how we found ourselves upon this planet surrounded by devils and demons, and how it is that humanity, especially modern humanity, during what would be the Second World Age, how we came to be locked into a matrix where we would learn through the duality of good and evil what it means to be in a place and in a world that has been given temporary haven to those angels that rebelled against the Most High and His Son. And so, and also, the reason I chose to finish up this series today was because I will be joining John the Baptist on Tribulation Now tomorrow evening for the second part in his series on time travel and the gods of Eden, similar to what I'm doing here, and also its connections to the Anunnaki and the creation of humanity, and that will be a round table discussion of what we're dealing with as a world and what we're facing as a collective. Because those of you that are aware and have your pulse on the unfolding, the alternative news medias and the things that the pulse of the information that is being released to the world and how the world is being steered, guided into certain opinion and into embracing certain theologies that now, since Darwinism and evolution has failed in convincing the world that there is a missing link that unites humanity and the monkeys and ape man, and the new premise is that the fallen angels and the ancient aliens and the Nephilim, that they are that missing link that we have been seeking out for so long, but that has eluded us. And so science is going the other way and embracing some of what has been considered lunatic fringe, but they are embracing an opinion and a revelation that I consider to be tied to what is the strong delusion, and that so much of what is tied to the revelation of the ancient aliens, that there are so many wise and very well studied individuals out there releasing books on this subject that are all quoting each other and utilizing each other, building upon each other's work to establish this as the truth of what occurred in the prior times. And they are claiming, asserting with the vastness of information that is now coming out, that the ancient aliens are the creators of humanity. And so that's why I have been focused in the way that I have upon the subjects that I've been trying to expound upon, so that you don't get sucked into that truth. Now, I personally also watch the Ancient Alien series, and I do so in order to understand what it is that they are trying to establish and how that works into the agenda of the New World Order. And it's a very, very well, what I consider to be a well studied and well created series, and they do cover a lot of information. However, there are a couple things that they do that the same thing as far as the ascended masters and the those that channel, aliens or channel spirits do. And number one is that they deny Christ as the Son of God and the only begotten of the Father, and that he had any significant role in coming to the flesh other than to be a great prophet or a great teacher. And the aliens of old, that even back in the 60s that were being channeled, they did this as well. And also they deny the Father and the Son as being the creator of humanity, and that they give credit to the ancient aliens as to having created us through test tubes or experimentally through DNA or gene splicing, or in scientific experiments which allowed them to combine their, the seed of their own with the seed of the pre-Adamic races that were here, and that was how modern humanity was created. And so we're going to go into the second part of the story today. And remember that it's again my opinion that to understand this in fullness, one must have studied all things. And because of my disability and because of the amount of time that I've had to read and to research, because I know many of you that are holding down regular 9-to-5 jobs and going to school in the evening sometimes, or working out or whatever it is that you're doing, that taking care of kids, that a lot of your time and a lot of your free time, your space to dedicate to self, is already committed to other things, other aspects of trying to survive and make it within this world. And so not many people have had the opportunity that I have over the past couple decades to study and investigate. Now, I've gone to school and I've graduated from college and I've done all those things as well. But I have had time to read all of the extra biblical, extra canonical, the extra teachings, the Sumerian teachings, the other mythologies, and and I've studied most everything that I could find, even the Masonic lore and things like that. And so I've been blessed to put all of those pieces together, and having studied and been involved in the New Age for 20 years before being brought back with renewed eye and renewed vigor to study the scriptures and to understand the biblical teachings in new light, I think that I have a unique perspective on having done it that way, and that the Father allowed me to live my life and to have done it this way in order to bring me full circle. And so that's what I consider that a blessing, which, when I started to being led to discernment or revelation on certain things, and these things were not being spoken about or talked about by mainstream churchianity or by the regular pastors and preachers and people of authority out there, that's when I decided to start writing my books and also to start doing the radio program and to bring insight in this way to share fellowship with you. And so, and there are now others, in John the Baptist, Jonathan Kleck, Professor Truth, others, Alexander Bachman, other individuals that have been brought to similar discernment on these many very things. Dr. Joy and I align on a lot of different things. So there's a lot of individuals out there that have, and many of you as listeners that have joined up at the website fallenangels.tv that share information. There's a lot of confirming witness to these things now. But there are still so many more that don't get it and don't consider it of any importance at all to come to understand these things. And so you are on the forefront, and there's going to be a time. There's going to be a time, I don't know exactly when it'll be, I feel that it's near, that people are going to ask you for the discernment that you share with us and for the understandings that you have. And you're going to help them to wipe away the deception. And you're going to help them to understand the Gospels in new light. And you're going to lead them to answers and guide them into understanding that they never thought possible. And so, all right, I'm going to go ahead and go into some of this because I know that we'll quickly run out of time. In the last show, in the first episode that I did on the Gods of Eden, we ended with the Anunnaki succeeding, the fallen angels succeeding in transforming the Bigfoot type of pre-Adamic humanity, that particular creature, in succeeding into transforming this being into what was a primitive worker, and that the creature that they had created was able to do certain things, but it still did not have the intelligence, the ability to utilize language. It could understand instruction in minor ways, but it still was not complex in its thinking, and it was not it was not capable as we are, as modern humanity. And what is interesting to me is that when you see images and depictions of even like the people of Atlantis and the people of the olden days before the modern creation of humanity, Adam and Eve, those depictions often show those primitive races and those indigenous peoples as looking much like modern humanity. But that is a deception. That's not accurate as far as what I've studied and what I've been brought to understand. In truth, those creatures that were brought into being before the Father and the Son created their own creature, they were much like the Neanderthal, the Cro-Magnon, hybrid creatures that were, brought into being, the half man, half animal, and it wasn't. They weren't like the modern humans that the Father and the Son brought into being. And also, I want to say this before going into the text, is that they cannot create life. They have to mold, transform, and manipulate from what the Father and the Son already had brought into being and what was genetically available here upon the planet. And the Gnostic texts cover this in great detail as well. I share all those stories in my 6th book, Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here. And for those that want to know even more than what I'm going to be covering in this 2-part series, because in my book I cover all the Gnostic texts as well, all the pseudepigraphal, the apocryphal texts, and tie all of those into this particular revelation. And whereas I'm just going to cover the Sumerian teachings here, along with certain biblical passages, but absolutely not in the fullness that I do within that book. And so, just realize that they cannot create life. Even Lucifer, in one of the, I believe it's in the Cave of Treasures, that speaks about the return of the Nephilim and the loosening of the locust army and the giants at the end of days, to be, the wrath of God poured out on those not written into the book of life, that they will have part to play in the decimation of those people. That it speaks about that one of the signs of how you will know that the Antichrist is not the real Christ is that he cannot create life, and he cannot resurrect life in the degree and the capacity that Christ can. He can certainly give the illusion that he can resurrect life, but that he cannot in actuality do so, because it's the Son through the Father that is the arbiter of life and death. And that, just as he was the first resurrected, and that when he died on the cross and went down into Sheol, went down to Abraham's bosom and took Adam and all of the other patriarchs that were being held, awaiting his death, that he makes that determination and he has that ability, just as he was able to call forth Lazarus from the grave after he had been dead for more than 3 days. And so the Son trumps death and has the power to resurrect to life, and also to take and have us given over to Michael so that we can be baptized in the Arturian lake and then taken into paradise and the city of God, New Jerusalem. And that certainly that is exactly what he did when he died on the cross and was resurrected 3 days later. That he took his flesh and all of the patriarchs, the spirits of Adam, through the thief on the cross, back into paradise. Okay. So I'm just going to revisit a couple passages of where we had ended and speak about the degree of their success that the Anunnaki had achieved. And then we're going to go into the second part of the story, and that remember that the Sumerian teachings are written from the point of the fallen angels, and that they give a lot of credit to themselves for a lot of the abilities of the Father and the Son, of which they do not have, but that they do acknowledge a creator, a father of us all, the father of all beginning. And they acknowledge the Most High. They don't acknowledge his Son, but that they do acknowledge a creator. And so anytime that these teachings contradict the gospel, that's where you have to have an eye of discernment. And that's the thing that most people that have embraced and have accepted the ancient aliens as our creators, that's where they fall short. Because what most don't realize and don't understand is that the Gospels as given to Moses and that we have as basis for the Old Testament, they are absolutely inspired. And that only the Most High, as our Creator, could have given them to him in that way, to where there's a mathematical code. And I'm not just talking about the equal distance letter skipping, the Bible codes that are written into the text, but that there is also a mathematical code that verifies these texts as inspired beyond mathematical probability, and that no other text and no other, there's no people that are capable of achieving such inspired text as we've been given through the patriarchs of old. And that the prophecies, the many different scriptures that are prophetic in nature, that are, specific to so many different topics, even the vision of Daniel, are things that hundreds of years, even thousands of years have passed before fulfillment was achieved. And that these are things that could not have occurred if they were written by man or even by the fallen angels. Because even though they know some of what is going to occur, they are not able to tell you the end from the beginning. Not like the Most High. And so that is the difference. All right, let's go ahead and go into the text. The newborn's visage and limbs the leaders carefully examined. Of good shape were his ears. His eyes were not clogged. His limbs were proper. Hind parts like legs. Foreparts like hands were shaped. Shaggy like the wild ones he was not. Dark black his head hair was. Smooth was his skin, smooth as the Anunnaki skin it was. Like dark red blood was its color. Like the clay of the Abzu was its hue. They looked at his malehood, odd was its shape. By skin its foreparts surrounded. The next particular passage has to do, the next aspect has to do with the girl that they were able to bring into being, and that Adamu, who was the name of this, the male, the firstborn success that they were able to achieve, and that the Tiamat would be the name of the girl. and that after they were able to achieve success with these two creatures, they then had to give them the ability, they were able to splice their DNA and to give them the ability to procreate with each other. Because what initially had occurred is that they were having to put through in vitro, they were having to put these fetuses, these embryos, into the wombs of some of the Anunnaki women. And that these Anunnaki women would have to carry them to term, but that was a very slow process for them to multiply and to create as many of the primitive workers that they needed to mine the soil in the Abzu to collect the gold, and also that they were going to be shown, they were basically going to be like a slave class. They were going to be servants unto the Anunnaki, and that they were to do whatever it is that the Anunnaki would have them and wish them to do. All right, here's the accounting of the female. A female birth was given to Ninki. With joy she shouted. The newborn's visage and limbs they carefully examined. Of good shape were her ears, her eyes were not clogged. Her limbs were proper, hind parts like legs, foreparts like hands were shaped. Shaggy she was not. Like beach sands was the hue of her head hair. Her skin smooth was as that of the Anunnaki, in smoothness and color it was. Ninma, the girl child, held in her hands. She slapped her hind parts. Proper sounds the newborn uttered. Tiamat, let her name be, the mother of life, Ninki was saying. Like the planet of old, of which the earth and the moon were fashioned, let her be called. From her womb's life essence of other birth givers shall be molded. All right. So the story of Adamu and Tiamat. And the next part will be about how they were set up in an enclosure in order to bring forth the proliferation, the propagation of other slave class workers. It says this. And when we get to the story of the civilized man, which is coming up next, I will share discernment so that you can understand what the story is alluding to. For the semen and 7 cages they made, among the trees they placed them. Let them together grow up, malehoods and femalehoods attain. Let the males the females inseminate, and let them by themselves offspring beget. So were they to each other saying. As for Adamu and Tiamat, from the toil of the excavations they shall be protected. Let us them to the Eden being over, to the Anunnaki therein our handiwork display. So was Enki to the others saying, with that the others did concur. To Eridu in the Eden, the city of Enki, Adamu and Tiamat were taken. An abode and an enclosure for them was built. To roam therein they could. The Anunnaki of the Eden came to see them. From the landing place they came. So they were, basically like animals in a zoo. All right. The next part is where they had to examine the DNA, and they added to the DNA the ability for them to procreate. Let us the essence of Adamu and Tiamat afresh examine. Their emis bit by bit to be studied, what is wrong to ascertain. In Shurabak, in the house of healing, the essences of Adamu and Tiamat were contemplated. With the life essence of Anunnaki males and females, they were compared. Like two entwined serpents, Ningishita, the essence separated. Arranged like 22 branches on a tree of life were the essences. Their bits were comparable, the images and likeness they properly determined. 22 they were in number, the ability to procreate they did not include. Another 2 bits of the essence in the Anunnaki present Ningishta to the others showed. 1 male, 1 female, without them there was no procreating. So was he to them explaining. In the molds of Adamu and Tiamat, in the combining, they were not included. And so these first creatures that the primitive workers that were created from the Bigfoot type creatures. And in the first show I went through all the different trials that they had to go through in order to acquire even a slave race that could perform menial tasks, even very minimum in intelligence. So for those that want to know, you can go to that show, and I go through all the different trials and efforts that they put on. All right. The next part, which I'm going to skip, is speaking about how they were able to extract from 2 of the Anunnaki, male and female, the DNA splice that they would need to give to these primitive workers in order for them to be able to proliferate or to procreate. All right. Now we're going to get to the next aspect of the story. That is the creation of the new creature, and I'm going to tell you that it gets very, very detailed, because what occurred is that Enki, the Sumerian Enki, is flying about in his skyship, and he comes across these 2 females that are out in the wilderness. And according to the Sumerian tale, he copulates with them, which is, basically bestiality. He engages in direct copulation with these 2 females. And according to the Sumerian story, that is where modern humanity comes from. But what it doesn't tell you is that where these 2 females, where they came from, and why it was that somehow just out of the blue they happened to be and appear upon the planet. So, all right, I'm going to read this last passage before we go into that. Of the hardships of the work, the Anunnaki of the Abzu were relieved. The vital goal to Nibiru was coming. This is the result of the creation of these primitive workers and how they were able to make them basically like slaves and to perform tasks for them, and to that they were given over to taking over some of the work that the Anunnaki did not want to perform for themselves. Nibiru's atmosphere was slowly healing. The Earth mission, to the satisfaction of all, was proceeding. Among the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came, there was also espousing and procreation. The sons of Enlil and Enki, from sisters and half-sisters, from healing heroines, took spouses. To them on earth, sons and daughters were born. Though by the life cycle of Nibiru were they endowed, by earth's cycles were they quickened. who on Nibiru in diapers would still be on Earth became a child. Who on Nibiru began to crawl when on Earth born was running around. Special joy there was when to Nanar and Ningal twins were born. A daughter and a son they were, Inanna, who we know as Ishtar or Isis, and Utu by Ningal they were named. And so this part of the story is telling you that the Anunnaki also had children while they were here. And that these were who are cited as being the different gods and goddesses. You know, like Isis and Horus and Osiris. That these were the second generation of the Anunnaki that had arrived here. And how it was that in these different cultures and civilizations across the planet, how they instituted their children to be gods and goddesses and rulers over these different cultures. For primitive workers to the Abzu confined, did the Eden heroes clamor. For 40 shars was relief only to the Abzu provided. The heroes in the Eden shouted, our toil has increased beyond endurance. Let us have the workers too. And while Enlil and Enki the matter were debating, Ninurta this decision into his hands took. With 50 heroes an expedition to the Abzu he led. With weapons were they armed. In the forest and in the steppes of the Abzu the earthlings they chased. With nets they them captured. Male and female to the Eden they then brought. To do all manner of chores in the orchards and the cities they trained them. By the doings was Enki angered. By them was Enlil enraged. My expelling of Adamu and Tiamat you have overturned, so Enlil to Ninurta said. Let the mutiny once in the Abzu occurring, not in the Eden, be repeated. So to Enlil Ninurta said, with the earthlings in the Eden the heroes are becalmed. A few more shars and it will no longer matter. So did Ninurta to Enlil say. Enlil was not appeased with grumbling, let it be so. So his sons, he said, let the gold pile up quickly. Let us all to Nibiru soon return. In the Eden, the Anunnaki, the earthlings, with admiration observed. Intelligence they possessed, of commands they had understanding. They took over all manner of chores. Unclothed they were the task performing. Males or females among them were constantly mating. Quick were their proliferations. In one shar, sometimes 4, sometimes more were their generations. As the earthlings grew in number, workers the Anunnaki had. With food the Anunnaki were not satiated. In the cities and in the orchard, in the valleys and in the hills, the earthlings for food were constantly foraging. In those days grains had not yet been brought forth. There was no ewe, a lamb had not yet been fashioned. About these matters to Enlil, to Enki, angry words was saying, by your doing confusion was created. By you let salvation be devised. All right, so this is the part of how the civilized man came on board. But remember in the story of Genesis 1 and 2, it speaks about how no rain had yet fallen and there was not a man to create, to toil and work the soil. Now, this primitive worker that they created, even though they were able to take over certain menial tasks, they still did not have the ability, the intelligence to plant and to perform agricultural duties, and nor were they able to shepherd and to handle working with domesticated animals. And so now it's speaking about in the story, the Sumerian tells, of how the Anunnaki was starting to go hungry because now all these earthlings were also upon the upon the planet, and that the food crops and the natural grown food that was able to be gathered from the earth was not enough to feed them. Okay. We'll set this. By the proliferation of the earthlings, Enki was pleased, Enki was worried. The lot of the Anunnaki was greatly eased, their discontent was diminished. By the proliferation, the Anunnaki shunned toil. The workers as serfs were becoming. For 7 shards, the Anunnaki's lot was greatly eased. Diminished was their discontent. By the proliferation of the earthlings, what by itself was growing for all, insufficient was. In 3 more shards of fish and fowl, there was a shortage. What by itself grows, Anunnaki and earthlings did not satiate. So now it's saying how they're starting to go hungry. All right. Another observation. The offspring of the earthlings he observed, an alarming matter he noticed. By their repeated copulation back toward their wild forebears, they were degrading. Okay, so here it's talking about how the more that these primitive workers began to copulate with each other, as the more that the generations and their children were born to them, the quicker they were falling back into degradation, that they were returning back to their wild and primitive state of being the pre-Adamic creature, much like the Bigfoot type of creature. And so that they were degrading in ability, and that they were not evolving to any kind of higher capacity or higher ability. And now this is going to be the story. What I'm going to share with you now is the story of how Enki. Now this is similar. This is much like the Sumerian tale of Satan beguiling Eve. It doesn't tell you from where these 2 females, where they showed up or how they ended up being out in the wilderness wild, but that Enki, having spotted them, went down to copulate with them, and that when he did so, that there was a new creature kind of born, but that his copulating with them is not the result of this new being coming upon the planet. The creation and the placement of what it says here as 2 females, but I would ascertain that this story that I'm about to go into is the Sumerian version of the story of Genesis chapter 3 and the beguilement of Eve, which led to the birth of the 2 seed lines, the line of Cain and also the line of Seth, Abel and Seth. But it's a little bit different here. In this story, it says that that Adam, well, not Adam, they call him Adipa, and I forget what they term the female, but we'll get to that. Now remember, this story is very detailed and graphic in its accounting. On the river's bank, bathing and frolicking earthlings he noticed. 2 females among them were wild with beauty. Firm were their breasts. Their sight, the malehood of Enki caused to water. A burning desire he had. Shall I not kiss the younger ones Enki, his vizier Ismud, was asking. I, the boat, will hither row, kiss the young ones, Ismud to Enki was saying. The boat thereto Ismud directed. From the boat to dry land Enki stepped. A young one to him Enki called. A tree fruit she to him offered. Enki bent down, the young one lie embraced. On her lips he kissed her. Sweet were her lips, firm with ripeness were her breasts, and into her womb he poured his semen. In a mating he knew her. Into her womb she took the holy semen. By the semen of the Lord Enki she was impregnated. The second young one to him Enki called. Berries from the field she him offered. Enki bent down, the young one he embraced. On her lips he kissed her. Sweet were her lips, firm with ripeness were her breasts. Into her womb he poured his semen. In a mating he knew her. Into her womb she took the holy semen, and by the semen of the Lord Enki she was impregnated. With the young ones stay, whether pregnancies come about, ascertain. So was Enki to his vizier Ismud, saying, Ismud, by the young ones sat down. By the fourth count their bulges appeared. By the 10th count, the 9th having been completed, the first young one squatted and birth gave. By her a male child was born. The second young one squatted and birth gave. By her a female child was born. At dawn and dusk, which a day delimit, on the same day the two were born. The gracious one, dawn and dusk, thereat the legends they were known. In the 93rd Shar, the two by Enki fathered, in the Eden were born. Word of the birth Ismud to Enki quickly brought. By the birth Enki was ecstatic. Whoever such a thing has ever known. Between Anunnaki and earthling conception was attained. Civilized man have I brought into being. To his vizier Ismud Enki instructions gave. A secret must my deed remain. Let the newborns by their mothers be suckled. Thereafter into my household them bring. Among the bulrushes and reed baskets have I them found. Thus to all you will say. By their mothers were the newborns suckled and nurtured. To Enki's household in Eridu thereafter Ismud them brought. Among the bulrushes in reed baskets have I them found, so did Ismud to all say. Ninki to the foundlings a liking look, as her own children she raised them. Adipa, the foundling, the boy she called. Titi, one with life, the girl she named. Okay, so Adipa was the name of the male, and Titi was the name of the female. Unlike all other earthling children, the twosome were. Slower to grow up than earthlings they were. Much quicker in understanding they were. With intelligence they were endowed. Of speaking with words capable they were. Beautiful and pleasant was the girl. With her hands she was greatly dexterous. Ninki, the spouse of Enki, to Tiki took a liking. All manner of crafts she was her teaching. To Adipa, Enki himself teaching gave. How to keep records he was him instructing. The achievements with pride Enki to Ismud was showing. A civilized man have I brought forth to Ismud, he was saying. A new kind of earthling from my seed has been created, in my image and after my likeness. All right, I want to stop here for just a second. Let me check the chat room. Also, for those that know about the differences between like Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal man, and modern humanity, there's one particular bone that is spoken about called the Hyoid Bone, and how incredible the appearance and the sudden creation of modern humanity with this particular bone and other aspects that when modern humanity was brought upon the scene, created by the Father and the Son, that we were much smarter and much more endowed with ability, and that it was only then that with this particular hyoid bone and with the sudden appearance and the construction of modern humanity with these particular alterations and changes from that of Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal man and the other hybrid races that were upon the earth at that time, that is what made language, that gave us the capacity to have language and to understand language and to share instruction in similar ways. Now, if we were to take the Sumerian teachings according to what they say, and somehow, there were just these two females in the wilderness and that Enki copulating with them, now how would that create, the ability and the intelligence and the capacities that modern humanity has over that of the abilities and capacities that Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal man had, unless there was a new creature created by the Father and the Son, as is stated in the Genesis 1-2 story, and that the breath of life was given to Adam, and that the spirit of the sons of God would be married with the flesh bodies, the dust bodies of what was modern Adam and Eve. Unless there was a sudden appearance of a new creature, how would just Enki's copulating with a regular, normal, primitive worker suddenly result in the changes that then came about? And especially if what he was speaking about prior to this accounting, that each successive generation of the primitive worker was reverting back to what was the pre-Adamic creature. It just does not make sense. And so here's where you have to take the accounting that is provided to us within the gospel and the revelation of Genesis 1 and 2 and understand that there was absolutely an interdiction here by the Creator, by the Father and the Son, because we know that the Son is the visible embodiment of the Father, and that it was the Father through him that gave him capacity to create, and that because he and the Father were one, that he was able to create life and to create a new creature, and that is what happened, is that a new creature was created and placed upon the earth. And just as it says in Genesis chapter 3, the serpent, whom we know here in the Sumerian stories as Enki, that the Anunnaki are the feathered serpents, and that their own depictions of themselves show them to be eerily similar to what is described as the Nakash of Genesis chapter 3. And so this is the discernment that one must have when paralleling and combining the stories that are given within the Sumerian text, as well as that is was inspired and shared with Moses. And so I cover all of this in, as I said, in my 6th book, Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here. And I provide all this in very great detail, all the different passages, scriptures, and I also share all the Gnostic text in the information, because many people think that they contradict, but they only add detail to. And that once people have discernment and understand the things that I've been expounding upon in my work, then the secrets of those scriptures also reveal themselves, much like the Old and the New Testament, in revealing themselves when you have certain skeleton keys. When you understand that there were two bloodlines, two lineages, that is one of the skeleton keys. The other has to do with pre-existence, predestination, and our pre-election. So, anyways, going to continue on because we're going to quickly run out of time. All right. Now, with the sudden appearance of this new creature and with Enki's beguilement of Eve, we know that two lineages appear on the earth, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and that these particular beings, this creature, they were highly endowed, that they had the ability to speak and they could understand language, and they also had the intelligence to then write, and that they had capacities beyond that of the primitive worker, in that they would be able to stand the growing of food and agriculture, and which is a science unto itself, and also the domestication of animals, and utilize them for food crops. And that's exactly what the Sumerians talk about in this story as well. So, continuing with the accounting. From seed they food will grow. From ewes sheep they will shepherd. Anunnaki and earthlings henceforth shall be satiated. To his brother Enlil Enki word sent. From Nibiruki to Eridu Enlil came. In the wilderness a new kind of earthling has come forth. To Enlil was Enki saying, quick of learning they are, knowledge and craftwork to them can be taught. Let us from Nibiru seeds that are sown bring down. Let us from Nibiru ewes that sheep become to earth deliver. Let us the new breed of earthlings farming and shepherding teach. Let Anunnaki and earthlings together satiated be. So was Enki to Enlil saying, akin to us Anunnaki in many ways. Indeed they are Enlil to his brothers. A wonder of wonders it is, in the wilderness by themselves to have come about. Isamud was summoned. Among the bulrushes and reed baskets I them found, he said. Enlil, the matter with graveness pondered. With amazement his head he shook. Indeed, a wonder of wonders it is. A new breed of earthling on earth has emerged. A civilized man has the earth itself brought forth. Not the earth itself, but the Father and the Son. They created their own creature. The Adam that was given the breath of man. The spirit of life was put into him. And this was the new creature that suddenly, as they're stating here, appeared upon the earth. A civilized man has the earth itself brought forth. Farming and shepherding, crafts and tool making he can be taught. So was Enlil to Enki saying, let us of the new breed to Anu word send. Of the new breed word to Anu on Nibiru was beamed. Let seeds that can be sown, let ewes that sheep become, to earth be sent. So did Enki and Enlil to Anu the suggestion make. By civilized man, let Anunnaki and earthlings become satiated. Anu the words heard, by the words he was amazed. That by life essences one kind to another leads is not unheard of. To them words back he sent, That on earth a civilized man from the Adamu so quickly appeared, that is unheard of. For sowing and husbanding, great numbers are needed. Perchance the beings to proliferate are unable. While the savants on Nibiru the matter contemplated, in Eridu occurrences of import took place. Adipa in a mating, Titi knew. Into her womb he poured his semen. There was conception, there was birth giving. To twins, two brothers, Titi gave birth. So notice also that the new creatures, they did not have to be added to or changed in any way. That they very much were capable, right from the onset, to have children. Just like as if they were a natural creature created by the Father and the Son, and that it would be kind after kind. Which in my mind is also just verification that this was by the blessing, by the interdiction of the Father and the Son, that the civilized man appeared upon the planet, and that even the Anunnaki are blown away by the abilities of this particular being, of this particular creature, and they're surprised at how it could just appear upon the planet in such quick embodiment. All right. Word of the birth to Anu on Nibiru was beam. The twosome for conception are compatible. Proliferation by them can occur. Let seeds that are sown, used that sheep become, to earth be delivered. Let one on earth farming and shepherding begin. Let us all be satiated. So did Enki and Enlil to Anu on Nibiru say. Let Titi in Eridu remain, the newborns to suckle and nurture. Let Adipa, the earthling, to Nibiru be brought. So did Anu his decision declare. All right. I've already run out of time, so let me check the chat room. Also, if anybody wants to call in and ask any questions over the last 10 minutes, I know we've already got 3 people that are on hold, but if you have access to the chat room and you have a question and you want to call in, now would be a good time for that. Just paste into the chat room that you would like to do so. I know that those that are on hold are probably just listeners to the show, but we're going to go ahead and, shy and bashful, and you don't want to ask a question or share any commentary, just don't answer me when I pick up. But also know, Nancy, that I've been meaning to get back with you. I did get your message, and I do believe this is you, so I'm going to see if I can bring you on. Area code 978. Did you have a question or comment? And is this Nancy by chance? No, it's not. All right. We'll put you back on hold. Thank you for calling in and listening to the show. Let's go to area code 209. Area code 209, did you have a question or a comment as to the show?
It's Jennifer now. I'm just listening.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate you. All right, we'll check the one last caller. Area code 954, did you have a question or a comment? Okay, just listening. All right, no problem at all. Now, I know that this is a lot of information to take in, but I did want to share with you the story from the Sumerian text so that you could understand how it is that it's related within those texts and why so many people believe that the ancient aliens and so many that study the Sumerian teachings believe it to be so, even though it, even in their stories, it speaks about the differences between these two different creatures. And even those that, believe that the ancient aliens are our creators, I don't believe they understand the fullness of the story as it's presented and where the differences are. Because most people just think that they took, one of their own, the sperm from a male Anunnaki, and that they took the ova, the egg, from a female ape creature, like the primitive worker, and that in combining this, that they created modern humanity and modern Adam and Eve. And they don't even know about the difficulty which they encountered in going through the various levels, and how there were so many hybrid creatures that were weird in their embodiment, and how they were strange in their nature, and how they had failed. They were basically, creatures that had to be grubbed, that they couldn't even live on their own. There were so many different, even in just creating the primitive worker, there were so many mistrials and misattempts. And so, and again, as I said earlier, that whenever we're studying from the Sumerian teachings, and you can find that somebody's asking in the chat room, but that we're covering from specifically the Lost Book of Enki and other Sumerian texts that lay out the story of all, the differences between the primitive worker and also the civilized man. But it's my opinion that you have to always form your foundation for truth and for understanding what occurred in the prior times and in our ancient past from those texts which we know are inspired and know have been dictated by the Most High as creator of us all. Because in understanding and formulating a basis for that truth from what are the inspired texts, then can you place and parallel all of the other stories that have been shared to understand what occurred and how it happened and how those things that occurred in our ancient past, how they led to where we are now, and how it was that those details and those specifics, how all the other stories fit into them. And so when you take into fullness the accounting of not only the Old and New Testament and not only the Sumerian teachings, but also the apocryphal and the pseudepigraphal and the Nag Hammadi codices, the Gnostic texts, and all of the even with the Kolbrin Bible, which is a whole nother massive compilation and collection of texts which have been released. Those were released in 2006. The Dead Sea Scrolls, another massive collection of texts released in 1947 or rediscovered in 1947. that had been buried for thousands of years. The Nag Hammadi collection, which was rediscovered in 1946 and which had been buried since even before the time of Christ. I mean, it's amazing how understanding all of these stories together can bring clarity to what I feel occurred in our ancient past, and with which has been detailed by the mythologies of all the peoples of the world. And saying that also, did you know that astronomy and astrology and the names of the different constellations that predate even all of those cultures that came up post-flood, that the stars and the structures and the names of the constellations, that they also tell a story, and that story has to do with how there would be a Messiah, a Redeemer, born of a virgin, and that this child that would be born of a virgin, that would be the embodiment, the incarnation of the Most High, the Creator of us all, and how he would come to crush the head of the serpent, and that the serpent would nip at his heel. That the story that is accounted in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15, and the entirety of Genesis chapter 3, going from the fall of humanity to the second coming, when the Christ child would come again, after dying on the cross and extending salvation and eternal life to both the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. That with his second coming, that would be the fulfillment of the fall, and that with the separation of the wheat and the tares, the goats and the sheep, the wise from the foolish virgins, that will be the culmination and the fulfillment of the entire story of humanity upon the earth and the generations of the heavens and the earth, and that would be the culmination of what was the rebellion in the wars in the heaven, and that the temporary reign of the fallen angels and the authority granted to them here on this planet, that would be all fulfilled with the second coming of Christ. And the astrology, the celestial signs and the stories that are written into this, all that predated any culture, any religious institution, and it's all been written into the stars. The story of Christ, the story of our Savior Messiah, was written into the stars, even with his birth, conception, his death, his crucifixion, that there were signs in the heavens and the moon and the stars and the sun, all of that connected to even his coming and his going and his soon return. All that is also embodied and written into the stars. So don't let them tell you that the stories of Christ are just a new phenomena, or that the Hebrew scriptures are something that were based on the Sumerian teachings, or that because the Sumerian teachings are just the first teachings that appear post-flood. They're not even the oldest. That they were, that even before the modern creation of Adam and Eve, during the time of Atlantis and prior, they had knowledge, and they already knew about the coming of the Son, the only begotten Son, as who would come and redeem humanity and bring to us salvation. So don't let them fool you and don't get caught up in the strong delusion. Do your homework, study as much as you can, verify yourself as approved in your study, in your seeking of the kingdom, in your wanting to know the truth, because it's that way that you're going to be led to the secrets. And I am nothing special. None of us are anything special in that we're privileged and nobody else can find and ascertain these things. If you study, if you seek, and you align yourself in relationship with the Most High and His Son, you will be led. Just as it says, knock and the door shall be opened, seek and you shall find. All those things are available to those that make the kingdom priority for your lives. Join me this Wednesday. I'm going to have Jonathan Kleck on show with me. We're going to be speaking about a lot of his work and how he also is confirming witness to the knowledge of the two bloodlines, the two lineages, and their connections with the sons of Cain and the New World Order. And then the following Wednesday, Dr. Joy will be joining me on Revolution Radio. For her books and her work, Beguiled, From Eden to Armageddon. Because it's important to know the beginning and how all things began and where they all started in order to understand the journey and the destination, the end from the beginning, because it all ties together. We'll speak to you soon. I appreciate all of you, and I pray that the Father and the Son watch over all of you, guide you, lead you in discernment, and put you under their grace and wing of protection. Until next week, all, God bless.